Okay guys, welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a bit different. Today is just going to be off the dome talking about the new Red Bull car. Now, as I'm sure everyone has seen, Red Bull's car looks drastically different than it did last year. So much so, close to the new Mercedes. Well, it doesn't look like the new Mercedes, it looks like the old Mercedes, the W14, especially with the vertical side pods and the massive shoulders. Now, I mean, they changed the wing as well, but the front wing is it's very adjustable. So now, obviously, the vertical no pods is where all of the talk is, because Mercedes spent a year and a half troubling and toiling about this no pod design. We heard, people like Mike Elliott and James Allison talk about the theoretical downforce levels could have given them a lap over the competition. And now you have Red Bull essentially confirming that they were in fact onto something. Now, obviously, this is a big blow for Mercedes if it does work, and we'll talk about that if it does work later. But I just want to say that Mike Elliott, for any of you who don't know, Mike Elliott was a person who essentially came up with this no pod design for Mercedes. It wasn't James Allison. James Allison, after 2021, took a step back from the F1 proceedings in Mercedes. So Mike Elliott took control, and he was essentially blamed in 2022 when this no pod design, when it really drastically failed, when the Mercedes was suffering with porpoising, when Lewis was complaining on the radio. They needed a scapegoat, and Mike Elliott lost his position at Mercedes. He was essentially the one to blame, the one to take all of the fault. And I guess there is some truth there because he's the one that came up with it. But what I'm trying to say is that imagine if Red Bull get this to work and Mike Elliott is no longer the guy that got it wrong. Now, everyone says that, well, not everyone, but what we're gathering is that what Newey did was create a stable aero platform. So it's more to do with the floor and suspension than it actually is to the side pods. And that the fact that Mercedes couldn't use it because their suspension and their floor were just not stable enough. Obviously, with the bouncing and the porpoising, they're two different things. Bouncing can come at essentially a circuit if it's not completely smooth. The car can just fiddle about essentially in the air. It can just rumble and bounce and, but porpoising is that rhythmic bouncing you see that Lewis had in Baku. It's a very rhythmic, harder bouncing. It's essentially like bouncing but harder, but bouncing is a bit more unpredictable, it's a bit more unstable. And what Red Bull think they've done is that they've got it correct, where over the past few seasons, 22, 23, they've managed to create a very stable aero platform to where there isn't much bouncing. Obviously, it didn't suffer much bouncing in 22, that there isn't much bouncing, and that they think, okay, now is the time that we can progress this. And now they've gone for a vertical side pod inlet. Now, they've kept it pretty secret, even at their launch. I was expecting them to put a show car out there and essentially not give us anything, but they did give us basically the actual car. And to be fair, they put it in like really low lighting so you couldn't see it, but if you look online, there will be like really exposed images. And Sergio Perez, when he was taking pictures and doing like the live streams, he actually revealed some of the car, or some of the side pods at least. So I find it really funny that Sergio has let them down once again just before the season starts. But yeah, is this design gonna work? In my opinion, I think Red Bull are taking a step back. Mark my words, people. Mark my words. Red Bull are not, hear me out. Red Bull are not going to be anywhere near as dominant as they are. I refuse to believe that the people at Mercedes could not figure out for 2 years what Red Bull has now miraculously figured out. I don't believe it. There is no way. Mercedes has been working on the zero pod design since 2021. They worked on it because they started on their car earlier than Red Bull did. They were working on a zero pod design in 2021, all the way to midway through the 2023 season. That's a full 2 years, maybe even more. Now, if it wasn't for, Lewis putting them in massive predicaments saying, we need to change the car, I'm sure they would have persisted even longer. These people were adamant they had it correct. They were adamant that they could get performance out of this car. And if they couldn't do it, I just don't see how Red Bull, in such a short space of time, would create a no pod design that works. Obviously, it's not strictly no pod. It does have a vertical inlet, but it also has that letterbox inlet that they did have last year. And interestingly enough, it creates almost like an upside down L shape. Now, if you look at the new Mercedes, their car, it's more like a smoothed out upside down L shape, more like a triangle upside down L shape. But I think they're really similar. Red Bull's gone for something that fits inside the bodywork really sharp, and Mercedes have gone for something a bit more smooth. But I think it's very keen to say that they've gone through similar designs, but Red Bull has clearly gone for something with a lot more of a no pod-esque design. Obviously, the massive things different about theirs versus Mercedes no pod is, in my opinion, the downwashing. They've managed to incorporate essentially like a zero pod-esque design while still getting downwashing into their aerodynamics. Whereas when Mercedes did it, if you remember, it was like a Coke bottle. It was very smooth along the surface of the car. Obviously, I'm not an aerodynamicist, but I'm sure I'll put some pictures on that you guys can see. They were similar in terms of the shape of the inlet, but they were different in terms of what the rest of the car looked like and how that inlet connected with the rest of the car. I just don't believe Red Bull. I don't see Red Bull's getting this completely wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden the pack is now very bunched up at the top of the grid, because this is a very, very risky design, as Mercedes has shown, and I'm just not convinced Red Bull have got it right from the get-go. So this could leave some way for maybe a Mercedes, maybe a Ferrari, maybe a McLaren, maybe an Aston Martin, just to really get on the heels of Red Bull. And if we can give Red Bull some pressure, I'm not sure they have the cojones of Mercedes to stick this one out. Obviously, everyone, the pictures have been going around of Adrian Newey looking at the W14 and then writing something down on his board. Everyone's saying, I can fix her. But this is really interesting. I'm really interested in how this is going to pan out. It has made testing a lot more exciting. Generally, I'm not like too excited for testing because of sandbagging, but I don't imagine there's going to be as much sandbagging from Red Bull because they're going to want to get some real data. So, hey, testing is in a couple days. Let's see how this pans out.